Hi, third graders. Welcome to our first distance learning math lesson. We are going to pick up where we left off with fractions. Before we left school, we were studying fractions. Specifically, we did a lesson on equivalent fractions. That's the last lesson we had done before we left. And so we're going to review equivalent fractions. And the reason we're going to do that is because what we're going to do tomorrow in tomorrow's lesson is going to build off of equivalent fractions, being able to find equivalent fractions. And along with that, I want us to practice just how this is going to work. How will these lessons be set up? I'm going to try to have the same structure with each lesson so that we get just a pattern of how this is going to work. So the first thing you'll always do is watch a video. And I'm going to try to make sure it's me and what you're used to seeing as far as the visuals we use and the formats that we use. But first you'll watch a video. And the nice thing about a video is that you can stop or pause and restart when we do some practice problems. You can rewind and review. You can rewatch anything that you didn't quite understand the first time and you just want to watch again. And so that's really independent learning. It's really thinking about your thinking, what you're understanding, and taking care of yourself and your needs as far as learning. So let's give it a go. Today's target is going to be that we're going to be able to find equivalent fractions using multiplication and division. And like I said, I know this is review, and it's purposely review because what we're doing tomorrow is building on this. So what we're going to be able to do by the end of today, and hopefully kind of a fun and different way, is that you should be able to take a fraction that's given to you, and then you can accurately name and show equivalent fractions to that given fraction. So, equivalent fractions, those are fractions that have the same value. So we see that word or a form of the word equal inside of the word equivalent. And equal meaning same value or the same amount. And so when we see in these bars equivalent fractions, we see that they all represent the same amount, just with different numbers as far as numerators and denominators. So this one is showing that 2/3 has the same value as 4/6. So 4 out of the 6 pieces are colored in here versus 2 out of the 3 pieces colored in here. But with these bars lined up next to each other, we can see that they have the same amount or same value, which makes them equivalent. So that's what equivalent fractions are. One shortcut we learned about with finding equivalent fractions was to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So if I start with 2/3 and I multiply the 2 by 2, I get 4, and the 3 by 2, I get 6. So an equivalent fraction to 2/3 is 4/6. I can also start with that same fraction, 2/3, but this time multiply both the numerator and denominator by 3 and get another equivalent fraction. 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 3 is 9. Therefore, 6/9 is also an equivalent fraction to 2/3. If I have 1/7 as a beginning fraction, one way I can just start with some easy numbers that are some friendly numbers, and again multiply both the numerator and denominator by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, 7 times 2 is 14. So this is saying that 2/14 is equivalent to 1/7. That's also shown here. So here I'm using on this side, I'm using multiplication to find equivalent fractions, but I can also show the equivalent fractions over here with these bars. So here is that 1/7, and by multiplying by 2, what that means is that I'm I'm doubling that amount. So I've split each of those sevenths in half, meaning I'm multiplying by 2, I'm doubling the amount of sections. So this is showing that 2/14 has the same value or is equivalent to 1/7. And then same if I were to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 3, I would get another equivalent fraction. 1 times 3 is 3, and 7 times 3 is 21. So back here showing that 3/21 has the same value and is therefore equivalent to 1/7. Along with multiplication, I can also use division to find equivalent fractions. So that would mean I would divide both the numerator and denominator by the same number. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. Therefore, 3/6 is equivalent to 6/12. Again, I could choose a different number to find another equivalent fraction. 2/4 is also equivalent to 6/12, and I get 2/4 when I divide both the numerator and denominator by 3. And then these diagrams over here are showing those values. And so again, this might be a case where you pause the video and you just really take a look at these diagrams and see how they are showing these equivalent fractions. So this model and the division over here, both ways I can use to find equivalent fractions. If I divide both the numerator and denominator by 2 in this case, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. 2/4 is equivalent to 4/8, and then the model is showing that same value. So here, let's practice a little bit. So this is where you're going to want to get maybe a piece of paper or some kind of writing utensil and source that you can write on, and you practice a little bit. So right now, you find some equivalent fractions to 2/6. Pause the video and find some equivalent fractions. When you're ready, unpause the video. Now there are an infinite number of equivalent fractions you could have found to 2/6. I could multiply both the numerator and denominator by 2, and I would get 2 times 2 is 4, 6 times 2 is 12, 4/12 is an equivalent fraction to 2/6. I could also multiply both the numerator and denominator by 3, and so 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. So therefore 6/18 is also equivalent to 2/6. Maybe I would want to jump higher and go to something like times 10. So if I multiply both the numerator and denominator by 10, 2 times 10 is 20. 6 times 10 is 60ths. Therefore, 20/60ths is also equivalent to 2/6. I can also divide, remember. So when I look at both 2 and 6, they're both even numbers, which means I can divide both numerator and denominator by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 1/3 is an equivalent fraction to 2/6. How about 3/15? Pause and find a couple of equivalent fractions at least for 3/15, and then unpause. If I divide both the numerator and denominator by 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 15 divided by 3 is 5, so 1/5 is an equivalent fraction. I could multiply both by 2, and therefore 3 times 2 is 6, 15 times 2 is 30, so 6/30 is equivalent to 3/15. What other equivalent fractions did you find, and what did you multiply by to get that equivalent fraction? And how about 4/20 as a final practice? What are some equivalent fractions to 4/20? I could multiply both by 5. 4 times 5 equals 20. 20 times 5 equals 100, and therefore 20 100ths is equivalent to 4 20ths. I could also divide both numerator and denominator by either 2 or 4. So let's say if I divide both by 4, 4 divided by 4 is 1, 20 divided by 4 is 5. So I could say 1/5 is equivalent to 4 20ths. What other equivalent fractions did you find, and what did you multiply by? At the end of this video, the next slide is going to have some practice can-dos. So what that means is you do need to practice by choosing at least one of these options. If you like using IXL, there have been 2 IXL recommendations given for you. These are different than the ones we did in the classroom. So before we left, these are a grade higher. So you, just like in the classroom, you'd want to have a piece of paper, a piece of scratch paper near you so you can practice or write some ideas down or do some figuring and then write your answers in IXL. If you'd like to check out a Brain Pop Junior video, you would click on that link and it would take you to Brain Pop Junior. This is the Brain Pop that has a video on equivalent fractions. They have more visuals that if you think watching and listening is helpful for you, the username and password are here if it asks for them. And then also, when you're done, there are some quiz options. And since this is Brain Pop Junior, you'll want to choose the hard quiz for some practice. And then once you've chosen at least one of those to practice, there's always going to be a must do. So this is kind of like an exit slip or a check-in. You're showing that you've learned what you need to do. So on the must do screen for today, it says, show 2 equivalent fractions for 3/4. You may draw pictures, or since you're at home, maybe you could use some objects from your home. So that may mean, for example, getting out some Legos. I know there's different sizes of Legos. Could you show fractions with those Legos? Is a long Lego equivalent to 2 shorter Legos, and therefore could you show some equivalent fractions that way? Or maybe while you eat lunch today, you make a sandwich. Could you show equivalent fractions with some food of some sort? Once you've done that, this link is to a Flipgrid. So click on that link to go to the Flipgrid to show and explain your work with equivalent fractions. Have fun, 3rd graders. Can't wait to see what you show us. Also, after you have recorded your Flipgrid, you are always welcome to watch each other's videos and give some encouraging words for comments. It might be fun to see the different ways people show fractions. So let them know that.